she was trained to obey. But he taught her to love. In the distant future, where starlight painted alien worlds in hues of possibility, the planet Viera spun slowly beneath twin crimson moons. Its surface, scarred by endless mining operations, harbored secrets darker than its red-dusted canyons. Among the colonized worlds, Viera had earned a reputation for its wealth and its cruelty. She existed without a name, a creature of impossible beauty, trapped in a life of servitude. Her fur shimmered like liquid starlight, catching the artificial glow of Lord Kendry's crystal mansion. Those luminous blue eyes, which should have sparkled with joy and mischief, held only the hollow echo of broken dreams. She had been bred for one purpose: to serve as a living ornament, a pleasure animal for the entertainment of Viera's elite. The mansion's corridors stretched endlessly, their transparent walls reflecting her image in infinite, haunting repetitions. Each reflection whispered the same truth: you are nothing but a possession. Lord Kendry had trained her with meticulous cruelty, teaching her to smile on command, to respond with grace that masked her pain, to be everything except herself. Her days blurred into a monotonous symphony of obedience: wake before dawn, bathe in perfumed waters, submit to having her fur brushed until it gleamed, stand perfectly still while draped in silks and jewels that felt heavier than chains. Smile. Always smile, even when her heart was breaking. The other servants avoided her eyes, perhaps recognizing their own trapped reflections in her gaze. She was neither fully human nor entirely alien, existing in a liminal space that made everyone uncomfortable. The elite who visited the mansion spoke about her as if she were furniture, their words cutting deeper than any physical wound. At night, alone in her luxurious prison, she would press her face against the cool crystal walls and stare out at Viera's endless storms. The red dust danced in violent spirals, free in a way she could never be. Sometimes, in the depths of her despair, she caught glimpses of something else, fragments of memories that felt like dreams, running through silver forests beneath alien stars. The sensation of wind in her fur, the sound of her own laughter, wild and unrestrained. But these visions faded like morning mist, leaving her with only the cold reality of her existence. She was Lord Kendry's prize, his most valuable treasure, displayed at every gathering to demonstrate his power and wealth. Guests would reach out to touch her fur with casual possessiveness, never seeing the person beneath the surface. As the twin moons reached their zenith, casting the mansion in an ethereal glow, she made a silent promise to the stars. Someday, somehow, she would remember who she was meant to be. She didn't know that tomorrow would bring a stranger whose gentle eyes would begin to unlock the chains around her heart. The grand ballroom of Lord Kendry's mansion had never seen such splendor. Crystal chandeliers cast rainbow fractals across, walls adorned with treasures from a dozen worlds. The celebration marked the completion of Viera's newest mining operation, a shaft so deep it would fund Lord Kendry's ambitions for decades to come. She stood on the raised platform, draped in midnight blue silk that complemented her luminous eyes. The fabric clung to her form like liquid shadow, and jewels worth more than most people's lives adorned her throat and wrists. To the gathered elite, she was the perfect ornament, beautiful, silent, and utterly controlled. Ladies and gentlemen, Lord Kendry's voice boomed across the ballroom. Tonight we celebrate not just our success but the bonds of partnership that make such achievements possible. His cold eyes found her, and she suppressed a shiver. To honor our distinguished guest, Trader Elias of the Meridian Coalition, I present my most prized possession. The crowd murmured appreciation as all eyes turned to her. She had perfected the art of standing perfectly still while her soul screamed. But then she saw him, the man Lord Kendry was addressing, and something shifted in the air around her. Elias was not like the others. Where they wore their wealth like armor, he moved with quiet confidence. His clothes were fine but understated, and when their eyes met across the crowded room, she felt something she had almost forgotten: recognition. Not of his face, but of something deeper, a kindness that seemed impossible in this place. "You are too generous, Lord Kendry," Elias said, his voice carrying a warmth that made her heart flutter unexpectedly. "But I could not accept such a gift." The ballroom fell silent. No one refused Lord Kendry's generosity. It was both an honor and a trap. Lord Kendry's smile grew sharp. "I insist. She is perfectly trained, utterly obedient. She will bring you great pleasure and status among your peers." As the two men spoke about her as if she were absent, she found herself studying Elias's face. There was something in his expression, a tension that suggested he was as uncomfortable with this exchange as she was. When he looked at her again, she saw conflict in his dark eyes, as if he were wrestling with some internal struggle. "She is beautiful," he said finally, his words carefully chosen. "If you truly wish to bestow such a gift, I am honored to accept." The crowd erupted in applause, but she barely heard it. As the celebration continued around them, Elias approached the platform. Unlike others who had touched her with casual ownership, he extended his hand palm up as if asking permission. When she placed her fingers in his, she felt warmth spread up her arm, a sensation so foreign it almost made her gasp. "What do they call you?" he asked quietly, his voice meant for her ears alone. She opened her mouth, then closed it again. She had no answer. She had never been asked. Something flickered in his eyes. Anger, perhaps, or sorrow. "I see," he said, softly. "Well, that will have to change." As he led her from the platform, her legs trembled with more than nervousness. For the first time in longer than she could remember, she felt the stirring of something dangerous and wonderful. Hope. The guest quarters where Elias stayed were simpler than Lord Kendry's opulent rooms, but they felt different, warmer somehow, despite the crystal walls. She stood near the window, uncertain as he moved about the space with easy grace. He had dismissed the servants who tried to explain her care and maintenance, a phrase that made her flinch. "You don't need to stand," he said gently, settling into a chair. "Please sit wherever you're comfortable." The invitation confused her. She had been trained to stand until given specific commands, to move only when directed. But something in his tone suggested this wasn't a command, it was a choice. Hesitantly, she perched on the edge of a cushioned bench, ready to spring up if she had misunderstood. Elias watched her with those thoughtful eyes. "You're frightened," he observed, not accusingly but with a sadness that made her chest tight. "How long have you been here?" She tried to remember, but time had lost meaning in her captivity. I don't know," she whispered, surprised by the sound of her own voice. She so rarely spoke that the words felt rusty. He leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees. "What do you remember from before?" Before. The word hung in the air like a promise. She closed her eyes, reaching for those fragmentary dreams that haunted her sleep. "Trees," she said slowly. "Silver trees with leaves that sang in the wind. Running. I remember running and feeling." She struggled for the word. "Free. You were taken from your home." It wasn't a question. She nodded, wrapping her arms around herself. "Lord Kendry says I was bred for this, that serving is my purpose, but sometimes I dream of stars I've never seen, of voices calling a name I can't remember." Elias was quiet for a long moment, and when he spoke, his voice carried a weight that made her look up. "I travel between worlds for my work. I've seen many terrible things, but I've also learned something important. Everyone deserves a name, a real name, chosen by themselves or given with love." Her heart began to race. "A name?" "Names have power," he continued, his eyes never leaving hers. "They declare to the universe that you exist as yourself, not as someone else's possession. They're the first step toward freedom." She felt tears gathering, another sensation she had almost forgotten. "I don't know how to choose." "Close your eyes," he said softly. "Think of those silver trees, of running free. What name calls to your heart?" In the darkness behind her eyelids, she saw herself as she might have been. Wild, joyful, unbroken. The name came like a whisper from her forgotten self, rising from some deep place that had never been touched by training or cruelty. Lyra, she breathed, and the word felt like coming home. Lyra, Elias repeated, and the name sounded beautiful in his voice. It suits you perfectly. When she opened her eyes, she found him smiling, not the calculating smiles she was used to, but something genuine and warm. "Hello, Lyra," he said. "It's an honor to meet you." She pressed her hands to her chest, feeling her heart beat with new rhythm. "Lyra," she whispered again, tasting the syllables. For the first time in years, she wasn't the pleasure animal or Lord Kendry's possession. She was Lyra, and that simple truth changed everything. Over the following days, Elias visited her quarters regularly, and each encounter chipped away another piece of the wall around her heart. He brought small gifts that spoke of thoughtfulness rather than ownership, a soft cloth woven from fibers of a distant world that soothed her sensitive skin, exotic fruits with flavors that awakened memories she couldn't quite grasp, and books filled with stories of places where beings like her lived freely. "Tell me about the Meridian Coalition," Lyra asked one afternoon, curled in the window seat as Elias sat nearby. She had grown comfortable enough to relax in his presence, her posture no longer rigid with learned subservience. His eyes lit up. "It's a federation of worlds united by the principle that all sentient beings deserve freedom and dignity. We trade fairly, share knowledge, and protect those who cannot protect themselves." "It sounds impossible," she said wistfully. "Like a dream." "Dreams become reality when enough people believe in them," he replied. "On Naraya, there are cities built entirely in the treetops, where beings like you hold positions of honor. On Thessar Prime, former slaves now serve as ambassadors, using their experience to prevent others from suffering as they did." Lyra felt something stirring in her chest, not just hope, but a fierce longing. What would I be there? If I could be anything? Elias studied her face with an intensity that made her pulse quicken. "What would you want to be?" The question was so foreign she almost couldn't process it. Want? She had been trained to want nothing except to please others, but as she thought about it, images bloomed in her mind, not the fragmentary dreams of her past, but visions of a possible future. "I would want to help others like me," she said slowly. "I would want them to know they're not alone, that they have value beyond what others see in them." Her voice grew stronger. "I would want them to remember their names." The look in Elias's eyes made her breath catch. It was admiration, she realized. He was looking at her as if she were someone remarkable. "You would be extraordinary at that," he said softly. "You have a strength that surviving this place has only made stronger." Their conversations grew longer and more intimate. He told her about his travels, the wonders he had seen, the injustices he had fought against. She shared her dreams, both, the memories that leaked through her training and the hopes that were beginning to bloom in her heart. One evening, as the twin moons cast their crimson light through the crystal walls, Elias reached for her hand. The touch was gentle, asking rather than taking, and when she didn't pull away, he interlaced their fingers. "Lyra," he said, her name like a prayer on his lips. "I need you to know something. I didn't come to Vera for trade negotiations." Her heart skipped. "What do you mean?" "I came because I'd heard rumors about Lord Kendry's collection. The coalition has been working to expose the pleasure animal trade, to shut down operations like his." His thumb traced across her knuckles. "I never expected to find someone like you." "Someone like me?" "Someone who could make me believe in love at first sight," he whispered. The words hung between them, beautiful and terrifying. Lyra felt as if she were standing at the edge of a precipice, about to leap into an unknown sky. But as she looked into Elias's eyes, she saw her future reflected there, not as a possession or a prize, but as a woman capable of love and worthy of being loved in return. "I never knew what love was," she whispered back. "But if it feels like This, like flying and drowning and coming alive all at once, then I think I love you too. Their growing closeness did not go unnoticed. Lord Kendry's visits to the guest quarters became more frequent, his cold eyes taking inventory of every interaction between Lyra and Elias. She could feel the tension building like pressure before a storm. But for the first time in her life, she was not facing the darkness alone. "He's planning something," she told Elias one evening, her voice barely above a whisper. They sat close together on the small sofa, her head resting against his shoulder. The simple intimacy still amazed her. To touch and be touched with tenderness, instead of ownership. Elias's arm tightened around her. "I know. My ship is prepared, and I have allies in the coalition who are monitoring the situation. But Lyra," he turned to face her, his expression grave. "If we're going to leave Vera, it has to be soon. And it has to be your choice. My choice." The concept still felt foreign, precious and fragile as spun glass. Freedom means nothing. If it's imposed, you have to choose it, even knowing the risks. Before she could respond, the door chimed. Lord Kendry entered without waiting for permission, his presence filling the room like poison gas. He wore his cruelest smile, the one that had preceded her worst punishments. "Elias, my friend," he said, his voice deceptively pleasant. "I trust. You've been enjoying my gift?" "She's not a gift," Elias replied, standing slowly. "She's a person." Lord Kendry's laugh was sharp as breaking crystal. "Is that what she's told you? How charmingly deluded." "No, my dear traitor, she is property." "My property, and I'm afraid your time with her is at an end." Lyra felt the familiar chill of terror, but it was different now. Not the helpless fear of a trapped animal, but the fierce protectiveness of someone with something precious to lose. She stood beside Elias, her hand finding his. "I'm not going back," she said, her voice steady despite her racing heart. Lord Kendry's eyes widened with surprise, then narrowed with rage. "You forget yourself, creature. You exist to serve, nothing more. Guards!" The door burst open as armed men flooded in, but Elias was already moving, his hand touching a small device at his belt. Suddenly, alarms began blaring throughout the mansion, and the lights flickered ominously. "Now would be good," he said urgently, pulling Lyra toward the window. "What's happening?" "My associates are creating a distraction. The main power grid is being overloaded. It'll take them several minutes to restore it." Lord Kendry snarled orders at his guards, but in the chaos of flashing emergency lights and confused shouts, Elias led Lyra through passages she had never seen. He moved with the confidence of someone who had planned every step, and she realized he had been preparing for this moment since his arrival. They reached a service tunnel that led toward the mansion's outer walls. Behind them, she could hear Lord Kendry's voice rising above the alarms, promising unspeakable punishments for their capture. "There's no going back after this," Elias warned as they ran through the narrow passage. "Are you certain?" Lyra thought of the crystal cage, the empty smiles, the slow death of her spirit. Then she thought of her name, of love freely given, of a future where she could help others find their own freedom. "I've never been more certain of anything," she said. Together they stepped into the crimson night, leaving behind everything she had known for everything she hoped to become. The escape was harrowing but swift. Elias's ship, sleek and built for speed, lifted off from Vera's surface just as the mansion's security forces reached their launch point. Through the viewport, Lyra watched the red planet shrink to a point of light, then disappear among the stars. "Where are we going?" she asked, marveling at how the question sounded. For the first time in her life, the answer mattered because the choice was hers. "Anywhere you want," Elias replied, his hand steady on the controls. "The galaxy is vast, and the Coalition has safe harbors on 100 worlds. You can choose a quiet life of peaceful anonymity, or you can join our efforts to help others like yourself. Or something entirely different. It's your life to live." Lyra curled up in the co-pilot seat, watching the stars wheel past. Each point of light represented possibilities she had never dared imagine. "I want to see those silver trees you mentioned on Naraya," I want to meet other survivors and learn their stories. And I want... She hesitated, then smiled. I want to wake up every morning knowing that I'm free. The journey to Coalition space took several days, and they were the most beautiful days of Lyra's life. Away from the oppressive atmosphere of Vera, she began to truly heal. Her laughter, hesitant at first, grew more frequent and genuine. She shared memories that surfaced like treasures recovered from deep water, fragments of her childhood on a world whose name she was beginning to remember. Elias told her more about his work with the Coalition, his voice passionate when he spoke of the underground networks that helped trafficked beings escape to freedom. "We could use someone like you," he said one evening as they shared a meal in the ship's small galley. "Someone who understands what they've endured, who can help them believe in the possibility of healing." "I'd like that," Lyra said. "But first, I want to learn how to simply be myself. I've spent so long being what others wanted that I need time to discover who Lyra really is." He reached across the table and took her hand. "I'll help you, if you'll let me. Not because you need protecting, but because I can't imagine facing the future without you." She lifted their joined hands to her cheek, feeling the warmth of his palm against her skin. "Is this what love is supposed to feel like? Like coming home and setting out on an adventure at the same time?" "I think," he said softly, "that's exactly what love is supposed to feel like." They arrived at Sanctum Station, a massive structure built in the heart of Coalition space, as the local star painted its hull gold and crimson. It was a place of healing, Elias explained, where survivors of trafficking and slavery could recover, learn new skills, and decide their own futures.